Once upon a time, there lived a very careless woman whose carelessness almost ruined the life of her innocent daughter. Imagine a mother being so careless that she forgot her newborn baby in a public toilet whilst having a conversation on the phone. It was only when she arrived home over an hour later that she realized that she had gone home without her baby. Luckily, a kind woman found the baby wailing alone on the cold bathroom floor and stayed with her until a baby arrived, breathless and crying, claiming it was a small mistake. This is the story of Iberi, the woman who lived like the world would fix her mistakes. Iberi was once married to a man who abandoned her with her pregnancy and relocated out of the country to start a new life. Stuck and frustrated, Iberi decided to get rid of the pregnancy, but all that she did failed, leaving her to carry the baby to full term. Iberi gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Whilst others jubilated, she wept, knowing how unready she was to have a child. As she sat there weeping, she heard her name from a distance. A familiar voice called out her name repeatedly, and Iberi was so stunned to see her childhood friend and classmate Uzioma. Uzioma had just given birth in the next ward, and she was so excited to see Iberi after a very long time. They spent time together, gushing over their newborn babies who were born minutes apart, as if fate had planned their reunion down to the last detail. They got talking, and Iberi got to find out that Uzioma was now happily married to a wealthy politician. She lived in the choicest area of Lagos, and Iberi could not hold back her joy. Uzioma, on hearing all that had happened to Iberi, decided to take care of her. She paid her hospital bills and even offered to set up a business for her. That was how Iberi's life transformed. Her friend Uzioma rented a small apartment for her, stocked it up with baby supplies, and opened a hair salon in Iberi's name. But despite all the help, Iberi remained as reckless as ever. She would leave her baby alone in the salon, without telling anyone, as customers walked in to meet her crying baby. How can a mother leave her baby alone in a salon? They asked themselves as they looked around in disbelief, searching for the salon owner. Some would pick up the wailing child and wait. Others stormed out in anger, vowing never to return. Still, Iberi saw nothing wrong with what she was doing. One day, Uzioma decided to pay her a visit at the salon. She arrived at the salon and met Iberi asleep on the sofa, whilst her baby was choking on her vomit. Her entire body was soiled with feces as flies buzzed around her like trash. Uzioma stood frozen in the doorway, her hand covering her mouth in shock. The sight was too much to process. Iberi, oblivious to the chaos around her, was still snoring lightly on the sofa. The baby, her tiny daughter, lay on the floor struggling to breathe as the vomit covered her face and body. For a moment, Uzioma felt the world spin around her. How could this be happening? How could Iberi, her friend, let this happen to her own flesh and blood? Without hesitation, Uzioma rushed forward, scooping the baby up in her arms as her heart raced. She cleaned up the baby and angrily woke Iberi, who staggered up from the sofa drunk. Uzioma could not believe her eyes. Iberi had been drinking, not caring about her baby. What if she choked and died? She asked Iberi, who stared at her blankly and replied that the baby was perfectly fine. I don't know what the fuss is all about, she said to Uzioma, whose eyes were now filled with tears. Uzioma sat there sad as she held the baby in her arms, her heart breaking to see how this baby was being treated by her own mother. Uzioma remembered her own daughter at home, who was born on the same day as Iberi's daughter. She knew how protective she was of her daughter and was so heartbroken to see Iberi cold and indifferent about her own. Months passed and Uzioma kept a close eye on them. She visited their home daily to check up on the child, who ended up growing into an extremely beautiful young woman. Her mother's neglect for her grew into full-blown hatred, and Ngozi could not understand what she had ever done wrong to her mother. She stood there and watched as her mother belittled her in the worst way possible. She called her a curse, a mistake, and a disgrace. Iberi constantly reminded Ngozi that she was never supposed to be born. She called her so many names, and Ngozi began to feel like the genesis of her mother's problems. She cried herself to sleep on so many nights and did everything within her power to please her mother. However, nothing she did worked, as her mother's hatred for her increased with each passing day. Whenever Ozioma and her daughter Daisy visited, Ebere would force Ngozi to smile and act happy. "If you ever say anything to her, I will skin you alive," Ebere warned Ngozi sternly as she smiled through the pain. She laughed when her heart was heavy and even watched her mother compare her continuously with Ozioma's daughter Daisy. Ebere would yell, "See how intelligent she is. Look at how clean she is, you pig. Even if I bath you with perfume, you still smell like refuse," she said to Ngozi, whose heart shattered to see her mother treat her in such a way. On her birthday, Ngozi sat back and watched as her mother gifted Ozioma's daughter a box of cupcakes whilst pretending that she did not exist. Ngozi watched as her mother gushed over at Daisy, hugging and praising her for being so perfect. Ngozi stood there quietly, her heart sinking as she watched her mother celebrate someone else on her own birthday. She didn't even get a happy birthday, not a glance, not a smile, nothing. Later that night, Ngozi returned home and sat on her bed broken as tears poured down her eyes. She summoned the courage to approach her mother, who she reminded that today was also her birthday. But her mother looked her dead in the eye and asked if she truly deserved to be celebrated. "You think someone like you deserves a birthday? You should be thanking me every day for not throwing you away when I had the chance." Ngozi's lips trembled as she replied, "But I didn't ask to be born, Mama." That was all it took. Ebere slapped her so hard that she fell to the floor. "Ungrateful child, you're nothing but a burden. Nothing good ever came out of you." Ngozi clutched her cheek, the pain stinging both her face and her soul. She didn't cry anymore. She was tired of crying. Instead, she stood and slowly walked away, her small frame heavy with sadness. From that night, something in Ngozi began to harden. She focused on her education, doing everything possible to make something out of her life. One morning, whilst Ngozi was in school, she heard of a new scholarship opening that would send the top student abroad on a full academic scholarship. Ngozi's heart lit up with joy. She knew this could be her only escape, a way to finally break free from the pain and humiliation that she had constantly faced at home. She threw herself into her studies like never before, stayed up late, read every book she could find, and even borrowed textbooks from other students. Ngozi studied during breaks, ate lunch alone, and blocked out every form of distraction. Weeks passed, and Ngozi secretly sat for the scholarship examination. She was so hopeful that she would get the scholarship, so she prayed, whilst hoping and enduring all the things that her mother did to her. That week, her mother Ebere informed her that a young man had come for her hand in marriage. She informed Ngozi that she was going to marry the young man whether she liked it or not, and Ngozi stood there frozen, unable to speak. "I'm only 17, Mama," she finally said to her mother, who told her that the decision was final. "Do you think that there's anything else left for a girl like you? You useless child. If you ever thought that your life will ever amount to anything, then you are delusional," she said to Ngozi, who pleaded with her not to do this to her. But Ebere did not listen. She went ahead with the marriage plans, not caring that the man in question was 30 years older than her daughter. Ngozi stood there and watched as her world crumbled before her eyes. She could not understand why her mother would do such a thing to her, seeing that she was still in school. Days later, a quiet miracle happened. The scholarship results were released, and Ngozi, despite the chaos of her home, came first, not just in her school, but in the entire district. Her name was on the board, her face on the school website, and the news quickly spread like wildfire. Second place went to none other than Daisy, Ozioma's daughter. The scholarship committee made it clear that only the top students will receive the full award, including tuition, accommodation, and travel expenses abroad. When Ozioma heard the news, she was filled with joy. She remembered how hardworking Ngozi had been and decided to surprise her with a visit to congratulate her and her mother. She arrived at Ebere's house with gifts, her heart warm with pride. as she congratulated Ebere for having such a brilliant child. Ngozi has made us all proud, she said with a big smile on her face. Imagine, first position in the entire district. Ebere, God has remembered your daughter. Oh. But Ebere's face twisted with rage. She didn't say thank you. She didn't even look pleased. Instead, she rose to her feet and stormed into Ngozi's room. Who told you to apply for any scholarship, eh? Who gave you permission to disgrace me like this? Ngozi's heart sank. Mommy, I didn't mean to disgrace you, she whispered. I just wanted a chance to be free. Ebere turned and walked back into the living room, where Ozioma still stood smiling, unaware of what was brewing. Then, in a shocking moment, Ebere picked up her phone, dialed the scholarship office in front of Ozioma, and said in a cold, clear voice, Good afternoon. My name is Ebere Chukuma. My daughter Ngozi will no longer be accepting the scholarship offer. We are not interested. Please give it to the next student. Before they could ask a question, she ended the call. The room fell silent. Ozioma stood there speechless as Ngozi, who had come out of her room, stood frozen at the doorway, her legs shaking. Then, as the weight of what has just happened hit her, she dropped to her knees and let out a deep broken cry. Her dreams, years of hard work gone in 1 minute. She sobbed like her soul was collapsing. Ozioma turned, stunned. Ebere, what have you done? Why would you do that to your own daughter? But Ebere folded her arms and said, Let her Daisy take the scholarship. She's better. Ngozi doesn't deserve anything good. She should marry the man I picked for her and stop chasing nonsense. Minutes later, the school called Ozioma. They confirmed that Adaeze had been moved up and awarded the scholarship. Ozioma broke down in tears on the phone. She turned to Ebere and asked the question that she had always wanted to ask in over 17 years. Ebere, why did you swap our babies on that fateful night? Ebere opened her mouth in shock as she began to stutter. She never knew that her friend Ozioma caught her swapping the babies that night in the hospital. What had happened was that Ebere had always been bitter with Ozioma. Back when they were in secondary school, Ozioma had everything Ebere ever wanted. Beauty, intelligence, admiration, and the love of the boy Ebere once dreamt of marrying. Life seemed to always favor Ozioma, and Ebere could never stomach it. So when she found out that they both gave birth in the same hospital on the same day, a dark idea began to take root in her mind. So in the middle of the night, Ebere crept into the nursery and swapped the babies. She then returned to her bed like nothing had happened. Ebere smiled to herself, thinking that she was about to exact revenge on the woman who she had so despised. But what she did not know was that Ozioma had woken up briefly that night to breastfeed and noticed Ebere moving strangely. Curious, she followed her silently and stood at the door watching in horror as her friend gently lifted her baby from the cot and swapped her with her own baby. Ozioma said nothing. She quietly hid in the corner and swapped the babies back when Ebere returned to her room. Ozioma kept this to herself for all these years. She returned home with her true daughter Daisy and quietly raised her with love, whilst Ebere went home thinking that the child she took home was Ozioma's child. She treated the child with negligence and subjected her to years of abuse, hatred and cruelty, convinced all along that she was punishing Ozioma by mistreating her child. But what Ebere did not realize was that every slap, every insult, every humiliation that she hurled at Ngozi was directed at her own biological daughter. And now, standing in the middle of her living room, with Ozioma's words echoing in her ears, the truth dropped like thunder on Ebere's chest. "You're lying," she muttered, her voice breaking. "You're lying, Ozioma." But Ozioma wasn't. She pulled out an envelope from her bag, a DNA test she conducted for a day like this. Adaeze was Ozioma's daughter, whilst Ngozi was the biological daughter of Ebere. Everywhere fell silent as Ebere's mouth hung open. She could not believe that she had been maltreating her own daughter for all these years. The revelation hit her like a ton of bricks as she turned to Ngozi and began to apologize. Not only had she hurt her daughter badly, she had also given the scholarship meant for her daughter to Ozioma's own daughter Adaeze. Ngozi stood there frozen, her face streaked with tears as she stared at her mother in anger. She now understood why her mother hated her so much, and the thought made her chest tighten with a mixture of rage and grief. All these years, all the tears, all the begging, all because her mother thought she was someone else's child. Ngozi took a slow, shaky step back. So you're saying that you hated me because you thought I was Ozioma's daughter? Ebere, still on her knees, nodded, sobbing. I didn't know. I thought you were her child. I thought I was punishing her, not you. I didn't know. Please forgive me, my child, please. Ngozi's voice was calm, but it cut through the air like a blade. But you knew I was a child who called you mommy, a child who begged for your love, and yet you still chose hatred. Ebere reached for her, but Ngozi stepped back. Ozioma, her voice shaking, spoke up. Ngozi, you don't have to stay here anymore. You've suffered enough. Come home with me. Ngozi looked between the two women, one who bettered her but never loved her, and one who loved her despite it all. She decided to move in with Ozioma, who welcomed her with open arms. Days later, the school released a public statement revoking the scholarship award given to Adaeze and reinstating it to Ngozi after a formal petition from Ozioma and the revelation of the abuse that Ngozi had faced in the hands of her mother. Ngozi traveled abroad a few months later on scholarship. Her mother, Ebere, faced the consequences of her actions. She regretted all that she did to her own biological daughter and spent years trying to make up for it. Although Ngozi finally forgave her, Ebere lived her life regretting all the things she did to her daughter, all the hatred, bitterness and pain that she subjected to her own daughter, haunted her for all her years. It was so hard to bear. She learned her lesson the hard way, never to let bitterness rule her life. She also apologized to Ozioma, who had been nothing but kind to her despite everything. The lessons to be learned from this story is that bitterness and envy can destroy not just others, but the person who harbors them. Ebere's careless choices, fueled by jealousy and hatred, almost ruined the life of her innocent daughter and left her with deep regrets that she could never erase. True love is unconditional, and children should never be punished for the bitterness adults carry in their hearts. Healing begins with repentance, humility and forgiveness, but some scars remain forever as reminders of the damage caused by careless hearts. I hope you enjoyed the story.